And whatever happens next, we're confident that that should be the same conclusion. And if it's not, then something other than the facts and the law has come into play.
That is a question that is still unexplained from the Justice Department, which is why now? Why is he being made a special counsel now? We know it's because he asked for it, but it is still certainly a question. But you know as well as I do that special counsels have a lot of leeway. I mean, are you worried that this is going to become a much broader investigation than it is right now?
Well, again, two things. First, his title became special counsel today. His powers were the same yesterday. So what's different? It doesn't make any difference to us given what we understood to be the case. Once again, people need to understand that the Attorney General and Mr. Weiss, have said for a long time that he had all the authority that he needed to bring any charge that was appropriate in any place. So what does a special counsel do that he couldn't do? The answer should be nothing different. As to why now or why he wanted this as of last Tuesday, that's a question you're going to have to ask him. But from our point of view, it should not change the outcome. Who could say that they have been the subject of such a painstaking investigation, looking at every nook and cranny, in which a conclusion was 2 tax misdemeanors and a diverted gun case, to turn into anything else? There's been no evidence or fact that wasn't uncovered a week ago that will be uncovered tomorrow.
So essentially, has he indicated that there are any other avenues that they're pursuing here beyond those tax and gun measures?
He hasn't said. In the proceedings that occurred on July 26th, there were a lot of hypothetical questions that the judge asked as to whether the agreement covered this or covered that. But once again, when we're talking theoretically, we don't have to. You have 5 years, painstaking investigation, looking at every possible transaction that Mr. Biden was involved in, concluding that the only appropriate charges were 2 misdemeanors and a diverted gun charge. What could possibly change after 5 years? The answer is not the facts. It's not the evidence. It's not the law. So if anything changes, people should be asking what else came into play.
So are you saying that you're confident nothing will change, or you're saying if things do change and this does grow broader in scope? I mean, special counsels, they can staff up, they can have quite a budget. I mean, this could be bigger than it already is right now.
Well, you could have more agents that would come up with the same evidence that came up after 5 years. You could have more prosecutors. If you were in court, you saw that there were 8 members of the U.S. Attorney's Office in court that day, maybe 7. I don't know that you could find more bodies that would do anything different than the bodies have done over the last 5 years. So am I confident that the conclusion should be the same? I am confident that if the prosecuting office follows the facts and the law, as they were prepared to say they've done when they came to court on July the 26th, that there should be no different conclusion than what they already came. And if, for whatever reason, we end up in a place where there's something different, we know by the nature of the history of this investigation that it did not come about because of any new evidence, any new law, or any new fact. So therefore, I should be confident, and we should be confident, that you can change a person's title, but you shouldn't be able to change their conclusion.
You know, one thing that stood out to me today was Garland described the investigation is ongoing, which was notable because Chris Clark, who was another one of Hunter Biden's attorneys, said weeks ago that the entire thing was resolved. That was the word that he had used. I mean, what is the discrepancy there?
So the proceedings on July 26th obviously disclosed a disagreement. And the disagreement was that we said what we understood the agreement to mean, which is what Chris said. So let me ask you and anybody who's paying attention the following question. What group of experienced attorneys would have their client plead guilty on Monday to a misdemeanor, believing that the prosecutors could bring a felony on Wednesday? So as to what interpretation of the agreement made the most sense, I turn that question to you to answer it. So there's only a few possible answers to the dilemma. Either there was a garbled communication between the sides, possible. It could be that somehow the prosecutors thought they were making a statement that they turned out either not to be accurate about or not to be specific about. Or it could be, as you saw in court, that they seemed to be changing their position as the proceedings went along.
Well, it certainly seemed to be confusion from the prosecutors and from Hunter Biden's defense team over what the agreement was, whether or not charges could be brought in the future. I mean, they filed papers today, the prosecutors did, basically indicating that the two sides are still at an impasse over this. I mean, do you now anticipate that this is going to go to trial?
All I can say about that is a little bit about what I said a moment ago, which is if the prosecuting office that were made up of Republicans and career prosecutors after 5 years believe the proper charges were what happened on July 26th, then that should be the conclusion tomorrow, next week, or in the weeks following. That's what I'm confident should happen. And should something else happen, then two things. One, people need to ask, if this was the conclusion after all this time, what changed? And it won't be the facts, and it won't be the law. And then the question is, what will happen then? Then we'll have to see. But I'm not saying that it's not possible that what was appropriate a month ago isn't appropriate now. We'll have to wait and see. But I can tell you that, listen, one of the things you know about what's happened is that Hunter has done everything right. Cooperated in an investigation, provided all the information, was willing to make sure that if something was found that he did wrong, he would accept responsibility for that. And that's what he was going to do and was willing to do. The one thing he's not willing to do and will never do is to accept responsibility or say he did something he did not. So as the charges were filed before, that fits into his idea of accepting responsibility. Should anything change, we will wait, but he and we will defend him. We will bring to the attention of the court anything that's appropriate, but we're not there yet. Where we are is
Abby,
making sure
I understand what you're saying, but is anyone asking, no one's asking Hunter Biden to accept responsibility for something he didn't do. I mean, these are things that he has admitted that he did.
Yes, but you just said, are we concerned or upset or worried that there'll be additional things or that there's more staff? The answer to that is he has made very clear the mistake he made, and that's all he has made a mistake about. And so am I concerned? I am only concerned that a force other than facts or law would influence any additional decision. And if this prosecutor with a new title now continues in doing what he's supposed to do, which is to follow the evidence and follow the law, the conclusion should be the same.
When you say force, who are you referencing?
Well, what I'm referencing is, and this is not a surprise or a secret, right? From the moment this arrangement and agreement has been announced and filed, you have every MAGA, right-wing, fanatical person yelling and screaming and saying it's not right and it's not fair and it's not just. You have the former president trying to use Hunter Biden as a way to excuse his own conduct. And at some point, that could pierce, the noise could actually be so noisy that it get in the way of the facts and the law. I am confident that a responsible prosecutor would not let that happen. And we'll just have to wait and see.
Republicans say your client is treated differently because of what his name is. It sounds like you agree with that, but just from the reverse, in a negative way.
Well, here's the point about that, and you just said it. Millions of Americans file their taxes late. Millions of Americans may or may not be in a possession of some
Not always
weapon.
to the tune of millions of dollars.
Well, I don't think that's right. There's a very well-known case here in the District of Columbia of a partner in a law firm who did not file his taxes for, I think, 11 years and owed almost $8 million and was able to resolve that with a civil result, paying interest and penalties. So there have been commentators who have pointed out that it wasn't for the fact that Hunter had the last name of Biden. He might, in fact, have been treated differently. But we understand that high-profile subjects of investigations get more scrutiny. But that doesn't change the fact that once the mistake was identified, Hunter wasn't running away from it. On the other hand, those who think that he got some sort of sweetheart deal should look at all the other people that have committed the same offense that he was willing to take responsibility for and see what happened to them.
And of course, it wasn't just the taxes. There was the gun charge there as well. But I want to just revisit what you were saying there when I was asking if you're worried about how broad this can be. I mean, ask any president, and several of our last presidents, I think everyone except Obama has had a special counsel or a special prosecutor. I mean, these investigations have a way of ballooning and taking tax that they did not initially have. Can you say with certainty that based on what you know, there's no possibility that any of Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings will in any way connect back to his father, the president?
Well, let's start with the latter. You've had dozens of members of Congress and their staff You've had dozen members of right-wing media picking and trying to find the connection between Hunter and his business and other family members, and they have come up with nothing because there's nothing to come up with. But as to your point about special counsels, remember, this is not quite the special counsel that you're familiar with. David Weiss was in charge of the investigation last year, the year before that, and the year before that. He is in charge of the investigation today and tomorrow. He has a new title. His powers, in our view, are the same. The evidence hasn't changed. The law hasn't changed. So why, after grand jury proceedings, search warrants, interviews, and proceedings that came up with 2 tax misdemeanors and 1 diverted gun charge for the 11 days that Hunter possessed a gun, should there be a conclusion, notwithstanding that he has a new name? That should not be the case.
But can you answer the question about whether or not you're, from what you know, if you're confident that this won't in any way link back to the president?
What I know is what the evidence has revealed. I mean, that is what people should focus on. It's not as if this started yesterday or a week. It started for 5 years with so many people in the United States, including with the power of subpoenas, as Mr. Weiss has had, to look at every transaction that Hunter was engaged in any place in the world in which he was engaged. And what did they come up with? They came up with a decision that the only 2 charges to file were 2 misdemeanors and a gun diverted charge. Not any of the other things that the MAGA right wing have been yelling, from money laundering to foreign corruption to foreign agent, none of that. It's not as if that wasn't looked into, and now the conclusion was reached. So do I know that that will change in the future? It shouldn't change. This is not a new special counsel. This is an investigation that's gone on for 5 years, leading to only those particular charges. So how should it be different tomorrow? It shouldn't be.
Hunter Biden was pretty frustrated last month from our reporters in the courtroom when that plea deal was falling apart in real time. I mean, you were in the room as well. What was his reaction when Merrick Garland came out, Attorney General Garland came out today and announced that he was being elevated to special counsel?
His reaction was in the following order. First, I don't understand the difference because he had all the authority yesterday and he has the same authority today. Second, this is the man who's been conducting an investigation, who is a Republican appointed by a Republican Attorney General and had no motive to turn away from any wrongdoing he found after he and his professional staff had looked at everything Mr. Biden had done. And the third is, if it's the same guy who's looked at the same evidence, now with a new title, the result shouldn't be any different.
The only thing that is different that we can determine as of this moment is that he is empowered to write a report. And Merrick Garland has said he will make as much of that report public as possible. Do you expect that you'd be surprised by anything in that report? Or the public would?
No, quite the opposite. You know, the report will be a terrific vehicle to point out that all the crazy allegations made by people with a partisan bent are not the case, that the facts only supported the charge of failure to file, that Mr. Biden himself was prepared to concede, admit, and state facts that would be in that report that could sustain that which he was willing to take responsibility for. So bring on the report, because the report, if it is done based on the facts of 5 years of investigation, will show the world that all these other crazy charges have no merit, and that which should have occurred on July 26 was the only conclusion that represented, again, I'm sorry to keep saying it, the real facts and the real law.
All right, well, we know you have a noon deadline to respond to those prosecutors. We'll see what that response is. Abby Lowell, thank you for your time tonight and for joining us.